Special mention for actor goes to... That's a really good answer.
Welcome to the Flick Lab. I'm Karri, and I studied media, so does Henrik.
Mm-hmm.
How are you?
Well, I'm Henrik, I study media. Occasionally I also do a film podcast.
Oh, it just so happens that I also study media. Do you
What a coincidence. And in today's episode, in order to prove that we do acknowledge that Asian territories mean also other countries, not just South Korea. We are looking films from Hong Kong.
We've done that a couple of times. Well, we did Chungking Express a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Uh-huh.
So it just turns out that my MacBook's battery just got busted. It's protruding, trying to get outside of the laptop itself. So now you just have to enjoy my mic from the phone once again. But, this just proves kids, do not leave your laptop sitting on your bed. Only your loved ones.
This also proves something that I've been telling you for, already a couple of episodes in the history of this podcast, which is fucking Max. Buy a PC like a fucking normal person.
You know what? Your propaganda is starting to stick on me. Because Linux is more compatible with just regular PCs, so here I come PCs.
Yeah, someday my propaganda finally reaches full point and manages to rid the whole face of the earth from all these hipster computers.
Speaking of hipsters and PCs, we have some... And love your loved ones in bed. We have 2046 for you today, as well as In the Mood for Love. And there's times of getting wild, days of being wild. Good lord.
Close enough. All films that come from hipster director Wong Kar-wai.
Yeah. I remember you saying that you are quite fond of his films. Is that correct still?
It still is. Kind of much like today's films, which are not all of them, but they all have this notion of their characters kind of looking back fondly about something. Well, and reminiscing something from their past, usually lost love in one form or the other. Well, I also looked back at my love of Wong Kar-wai's films, and once again was able to reminisce on exactly how much I actually love the dude's work.
Wong Kar-wai, though, right? But anyway, close enough.
Yeah, whatever. I don't know what I said. Fucking Samahong.
We are the utmost professionals.
We have been doing this for years.
But we were just discussing with Henrik before we started recording that these films are of the sort that getting into specifics about the films and their events might not be very fruitful, as we noticed that we don't have a hell of a lot to say about the story really itself, I believe, but more about the kind of separate contents of these films, let's say. So, yeah, there is a lot of emotions going on in these films. The sense of loss, the love, and getting separated, and even getting back together again after all those years, and the passage of time, like somebody so adequately put it, passage of time, and there's a lot of that passage of time where the camera is just, panning from A to B, and we're getting these emotions from the characters' eyes, and at some points I kind of like that. At some points I'm half asleep.
Elephant sitting still, here we come once again. But yeah, you're quite right in your estimate of the films, and well, Kar-wai himself, something that is typical of his movies, and this was something that already played a part in our Chungking Express episode, is the fact that while these movies are not void of plot, there is a story in all of these films, and well, at least two of them, in the Mood for Love and 2046 are a continuation pieces. 2046 is a sequel to In the Mood for Love, but still, despite all of these, despite the fact that yes, there in fact does exist a plot and story in all of his films, what the movies themselves mostly are about, they are about a certain emotions and kind of the feeling and evoking different types of feelings in the audiences through their characters, and they are about that more than they are really about any given story that the movies want to tell you.
And you could argue that every movie's inherent problem might be that for it to work, it has to work on an emotional level with the viewer, and you can never expect what the audience might see. Albeit it might be a minor portion of the audience that might not see what the creators intended, or they see it but they just don't connect with it. And this seems to be my problem with Wong Kar-wai's trilogy overall. Already spoilers. I feel that I'm just not connecting what he's trying to tell me. Of course, these are far from being like the first movies in this podcast where we are discussing a movie where somebody might argue that nothing really is happening, or that there is not so much of a normal structuring for the plot, like the three act basic structure. But I'm just maybe not connecting with his world so well. Could it be the actors? The performances are really great. The cinematography is mostly wonderful. I don't know if this is a stylistic choice. It must be, of course, that all of the movies seem a little bit gloomy, color-wise.
It most definitely is a stylistic choice. But just the same way as is also that all the images, well, they are not crammed. Right? They are not like full of objects and stuff. In fact, many of his images are kind of void of anything else except the main characters. But yet still, we are repeatedly seeing the movies where we are looking it through a frame that exists in the movie's universe. Like even though his hallways are not like big on, there's not like a huge piles of stuff in Kar-wai's rooms and hallways, but the hallways still always are shot in the way that they look really small and tight. But the same way, like his bedrooms and basically every room that Wong Kar-wai has, they always feel like they are tight. And usually it's the effect that comes from their, because mostly the cinematography plays the way that there is like an interior lens or interior layer through which the camera within the movie's universe or the movie's world is actually perceiving what's happening. Like you are looking at a discussion through a window or behind a door frame, or the camera is positioned in a hallway in such of an angle that part of the hallway's wall blocks like half of the image.
And there were some comments on, for example, in the Mood for Love, where it was supposedly, let's say, kind of like a 50-50 split between the two cinematographers, one of them being Christopher Doyle, whereas the other cinematographer had been working a lot with Ho Xiaoshen, so he had kind of his own distinct style as well, that he had established this kind of long takes. But that's kind of a funny notion, being that in the Mood for Love doesn't really have long takes.
Not really. Wong altogether, not really. Like if you take Wong and you take something like Scorsese, well, and you can easily see that Scorsese is like the guy who uses long takes and one shots, and Kar-wai more typically uses shorter takes, more traditional like cut here structuring in his films.
Yeah, if you want to see a bunch of long takes, you can go listen to our episode about Ho Xiaoxian just a couple of episodes ago with Mint Volcano. But yeah, so it's kind of a meandering mood that is in the centerpiece of all of these films, going through the emotions, and in none of these films you really get to anywhere. It's just a bunch of emotions, and by the end you do not get the girl, you do not really get that satisfaction, you don't get the happy ending. It's really like a sad ending for all of these three films.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I kind of like in Wong Kar-wai's work. Like the fact that he chooses a different route from your traditional Hollywood-esque love stories, where like the structure usually is that there is the finding of the significant other, then there is the hardship, and at the end of the day, somehow you get the girl, you get what you want. And Kar-wai, on the other hand, usually takes the route where the whole combination is that you don't get what you want, and you somehow have to learn to live with the heartache that you actually, which is the, well, can't say price, but the culmination of everything that you have tried to achieve throughout the film.
Yeah. So, and all of these films have been shot and structured in many ways impromptu at the set, where the scripts might have existed on some basis level, but Wong Kar-wai, when he has started actually shooting, it has kind of taken on the details right there at the set, and in many ways he has also frustrated at least his crew or cinematographers, at least Christopher Doyle, who left in the middle of In the Mood for Love because of his engagements with other projects, and the project of In the Mood for Love just seemed to balloon on and on and on. But he did return for 2046, but largely the same deal. Christopher Doyle was replaced by a plethora of other DPs. So his style is not set in stone at the scripting phase, and it is largely improvised, it seems. Even if you look at the shots that he has put together, it seems that there's not per se a fluid continuity from one image to the next necessarily, but with that also he has kind of created his own style, I guess, and he's using a lot of tricks to make it seem like his own, like there's these kind of time-lapse effects, there's crossfades and approaches that many directors wouldn't necessarily even look into, as they might feel that it's not part of the course that you do in Hollywood, and or it would make the film look cheap. But Wong Kar-wai is not afraid of using these techniques.
Yeah, and that's something that I also quite like in Wong's work. I'm one of those people who absolutely love the time-lapse, air quotation marks, photography that he utilizes. And Wong has been, like, reportedly he has been criticized for precisely using, like, for sticking to some of the repeated tricks in his films. The like time-lapse photography perhaps being the biggest or the clearest example of what the people have had an umbrage with before. Famously, Wong Kar-wai was considered that he was stagnating in his style. Like, reportedly, Kar-wai did not pay any attention to the claims that he is stagnating in his style when he did Happy Together. He just accidentally happened to make Happy Together as his next feature when the criticism towards him was presented. But still, some people consider that it's if nothing else, it's an accidental kind of a comment back to the critics. and something that showcases Wong Kar-wai's ability to kind of reinvent himself in the process. I don't know exactly how how strong that reinvention is in Happy Together. I kind of get the feeling that at times people are giving it more kind of more pedestal, and they are making it more mythical than it really is. In my opinion, Wong Kar-wai still uses his bag of tricks in Happy Together also, but even though Happy Together, I do think is pretty damn good film. It's like many of Wong Kar-wai's films. That too is somewhat dark and heartbreaking story. This time about gay couple, and it also has been remarked that it's one of the first, if not the first, film to come out of Hong Kong that actually deals with the topic of gay love.
Yeah, as we know that these kind of gay cinema waves started to take hold only in the 2000s, really, or even 2010s in some parts of Asia. How would you kind of summarize the three films of tonight, though? Like, mood-wise, what are they trying to communicate to you the most, if anything? Days of Being Wild is largely about betrayal and possibly falling in love again, but not realizing that love. And I feel that In the Mood for Love kind of largely has similar elements, and 2046 actually as well. That just the different phases of the characters appear in different parts of the film, but largely it's about the same kinds of emotions. Days of Being Wild, the male character might be more unlikable than in the rest of the movies, though.
In my view, Days of Being Wild is perhaps the easiest and the lightest of the films in the trilogy. It's the one that perhaps most has this tone of not completely losing what you want. And when it comes to like all three films deal with the idea of toxicity that stems from some aspect of love, usually from love that is not being gained. In Days of Being Wild, this is most seen in the film's lead character, Yadi, who is an adopted son of an ex-prostitute. Has this idea of a motherly love that we don't know if he has gotten that from his new mother, but Yari himself wants to daydream in this idea of finding her biological mother and receiving some type of love there. And Yari is like hands down obviously a toxic person, a toxic lover in the film. But outside of that, I would say that it's the most optimistic and most hopeful film in the trilogy. In the Mood for Love, that on the other hand is a movie that deals with a perversion of a fantasy. In the cornerstone of the film story, it revolves around a man and woman, both some people whose significant others cheat on them. They in fact actually cheat on them with each other. Like the woman's husband cheats with the main character's wife. And the whole idea, like the whole companionship that these two betrayed characters then form, it's based on the idea that they want to understand exactly how the betrayal was born and how it was committed. More specifically, why it was being committed. Why were they cheated on? And they kind of start this LARP where they act out different scenes from what they envision that must have happened in this cheating relationship. And they constantly, like they tangle on the idea that they don't take it far enough, that they are not like their spouses, they don't really cheat. It's just a LARP to help them understand the situation better. And as it then turns out in the film, this fantasy that you can have this carefree, we just a LARP, a cheating couple thing, it obviously does not work. Feelings start to form. In the end, they actually realize that what they exactly are their significant others. They are that second cheating couple. And on top of that, in the end, they are too cowardly to actually finalize the thing that they have. Meaning that at the end of the film, they both are left alone and heartbroken. And 2046, on the other hand, it deals with the ramifications of that failed perverse fantasy. Where we once again return with our main character from the previous movie, Mr. Chow, who now, after having experienced the betrayal in the hands of his wife, but also by being too afraid to chase Mrs. Su and losing that love also, as a result, Mr. Chow now has transformed into extremely toxic lover. Someone who kinda takes pride and joy in the act of toying with women's hearts and kinda like serially betraying them. He doesn't outright promise them love. That's where he draws the line, but emotionally wise, he is willing to reel them in. Really, like, extremely long way, almost to the threshold of promising to say, unspokenly promising to say to them that he loves them, and then immediately kicking them out of the door and leaving them out hanging. And 2046 very much is a story about how can Mr. Chow still, or even can he, kinda rebuild himself and rebuild his heart after what happened in the Mood for Love. And the consequences, or the resolution that we reach at the end of the trilogy is, well, not quite. He ends up becoming perhaps a bit better person, somebody who can look back at his previous antics with women and can acknowledge that he wasn't exactly being fair, and can be somewhat apologetical about how he has behaved, but a character who still can't commit his heart to anyone else, and whose happy ending, air quotation marks, relies in the realization that that's what he is, and in the act that he can accept himself as someone who never can commit and therefore is doomed to be alone forever.
I see a kind of a loop going on in these stories. First of all, in the first movie, Days of Being Wild, we have a woman who is very much in love with this man who doesn't really return that love. It becomes kind of an obsession game in that direction. And then in the second part, let's say in the Mood for Love, the man is completely head over heels. The woman, maybe could be argued, is also equally in love with the man. However, the woman is very much pushing the man away with all her might throughout the movie. That's my reading. And doesn't give in at all, whereas the man would be ready to go on forward with this. And in the third part, it's again flipped. Now the man is kind of hardish to reach, and the woman is the first to pronounce her feelings towards the man, and is being extremely coldly, as you said, kind of pushed aside. But they meet again, but what they had it's just not coming back. And also, yeah, as noted, he's having trouble kind of finishing his written story because he's rebuilding his heart and is perhaps unable to find the inspiration to create the happy ending for his story. So, in a way, kind of the character of the man in the third part, 2046, could be read kind of to be the same character that we have in the first film. Totally this kind of a player character who doesn't care about how he's treating women and just pushing them aside after having what he wants. So, yeah, it's just something funny that I have found. It seems like a loop.
It kind of is granted, but something that also plays thematically in these movies is the themes of trying to escape, trying to go further, and then later on kind of just closing more inwards and trying to stay put wherever you are. In the Days of Being Wild, both of the main male characters of the movie are some who dream of going somewhere else. Yari wants to find his mom, who is living. Is it in Taiwan or where?
The Philippines?
Yeah, Philippines. And Yari's whole thing pretty much is like outside of all the mistreatment of women. What Yadi really is after is that connection with his mom, and because of that, he's kind of dreaming of getting the name, whose his mom was, where did his mom go, and then going into Philippines, chase after his mom. And at the same way, in Days, the policeman is someone who is being trapped in Hong Kong by his sickly mother, and the policeman dreams of being a sailor. Once again, someone in profession where he can go elsewhere, leave Hong Kong behind. And both characters do this, and the resolution is somewhat of a disaster for both of them. For Yadi more than for the policeman. And then, on the other hand, in The Mood for Love, what the main characters, men and women, really want, they want to stay in a small confined space. Like they want to stay in one room, but the society around them is constantly pushing them apart. They would like to be together, but they can't because it's 1960s Hong Kong and cheating is kind of taboo, and all the other neighbors are starting to catch up on them, even though they themselves wanna pretend to them that no feelings are being formed. But very much in the Mood for Love, they stay in one area. The film itself stays in pretty much in 3 locations, which is the hotel hallway, one street corner, and then the workplaces of the 2 characters. When the characters have to leave, they have to leave. They don't really want to do that, but it's something that is forced upon them by work or some other external factors. And then once again, in 2046, we very much resolve with Mr. Chow, who desperately tries to return back into what he had in the Mood for Love, back into the same buildings, back into same characters and people he once knew, and he's also failing in that job there. So it's Days is about wanting to leave. In the Mood for Love is wanting to stay put, and 2046 is wanting to return back into something.
Interesting. Actually, I felt a little frustrated knowing that Wong Kar-wai is kind of loves all this international stuff. He likes traveling and likes to talk about different countries clearly and present them in his films, different cultures and how they might mishmash together or not, like seen in 2046. In the first one, you said that it seems to be the most optimistic of the bunch. I wouldn't know about that. There's a guy who goes to look for his family, his parents, far away in the Philippines, in the times when you don't have cell phones, completely disconnected, it seems, from the world. And then there's this shooting in the train. He loses his life and doesn't find his family and dies in the city of in the Philippines. I don't know if I can recommend that, but that's what happens to the guy. And yeah, it's lights out. And in all of these films, like you kind of mentioned, there is this that you cannot escape, you cannot leave. There's always somebody asking them to leave, but they refuse to leave, which is kind of frustrating and kind of makes the location where they are trying to head to feel kind of dangerous, and you shouldn't embark on this journey. The other one always stays behind, and it started to feel a little silly to the point where I'm screaming at the screen like, lady, what the fuck, seriously? You could just change your life and this miserable condition right now, but you just choose to stay with your asshole husband who doesn't give two shits about you. And so it started to feel even comical. And why would Wong Kar-wai encourage this kind of a behavior as a kind of a globetrotter himself? But that's what he does.
Well, to answer that, I would say, why does Wong Kar-wai encourage that type of behavior? I don't really think that Wong Kar-wai himself encourages it more than he sees that the societal attitudes of 1960s Hong Kong, which is the time period where all these films are based on, 1960 something, which was kinda globally quite conservative time period. And in most cases in these films, the troubles that these people face, or the end game trouble, the one obstacle that they can't get over with, well, they stem from two places. The first one is a broken heart, or some type of a failed love. And the second one is the society that surrounds them, but more specifically 1960s Hong Kong, which repeatedly somehow kind of becomes an obstacle. In The Mood for Love, it's the society by proxy of the neighbors that prevents the Mrs. Su and Mr. Chow being together. Because the neighbors are shaming Su and stating that, couples should stay together, and scares away the possibility of romance between her and Mr. Chow. In Days of Being Wild, the biggest external obstacle that rises, it comes very end of the film. It's the shooting that you point out, which is a result of traveling document restrictions. Yadi is trying to buy a fake passport in order to travel to some place, and that's the catalyst that leads into the chain of events that leads into his death. So, in my opinion, more than encourage, I do think that Wong Kar-wai criticizes the fact that these characters can't be together because the societies surrounding them, are constantly throwing some type of obstacle in their way. And because it's a societal obstacle, an individual character can't just, get over with. And when it comes to, you mentioned that you find it, in the end, found it kind of funny that all these stories end up with a downer note. That's something that I, on the other hand, really like these movies. Because what we usually see in movies, in fiction, is a successful love in some form. The hero gets the lady and they end up together, and there's a happiness. And of course, it's nice. Yeah, love can be happy and should be happy. And it's nice to see that there are all these loves that are happy. But at the same time, love also hurts. It hurts really badly, or so I'm being told. Can't speak from experience, being the forever alone incel that I am. But there is it's always a kind of a double-sided coin. It's happiness and it's hurt, and it's kind of a coin flip. Which side in the end lands face up? Do you get more love and happiness, or do you get more of heartache and hurt? And I do kind of like that Wong Kar-wai takes the route that he ends the films with hurt, because by God, we do have fair share about movie happiness.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I also felt that it was precisely when they are faced with societal obstacles that they consider them as such Boolin or Chinese walls that you just can't get through that in any way. And in the end, it's just really in the minds of these persons. They are just not allowing themselves to do anything, even after major ass cheating put on them. And that's kind of interesting about In the Mood for Love, where, as you might have read the same thing as me, that many of the viewers, at least in the Western countries, consider that the lead characters are really good characters. But yeah, how do you read good and bad into the characters? It might really depend on you, but the director Wong Kar-wai was wondering that that's probably because Tony Leung has kind of this kind of a innocent type of face, or non-threatening face, pleasant face.
I kind of agree with both sides of the argument. In my opinion, the characters in the Mood for Love, they are not bad characters, or they are not bad people. Mr. Chow becomes quite a heinous piece of shit in 2046 as a result of what happens in the Mood for Love. But still, in the Mood for Love, he's not a bad guy, and Mrs. Su is not a bad woman. They are quite good persons in that film. However, the story that they find themselves in the middle of, or the situation that they start to play out, that is extremely dark. Like you LARPing how the cheating possibly might have happened and trying to recreate the images of the scenes, how your significant others were trying to cheat. That's really dark, and in doing so, what they truly are trying to do, they're trying to kind of be with their own significant others. Mrs. Su is trying to be with her husband, and Mr. Chow is trying to be with his wife through a proxy. Like it's something that it's not wrapped into our face, but there are subtle moments in the scenes when, for example, they are in the restaurant and they are tasting, like Mr. Chow is eating the steak that Mrs. Su's husband usually eats, and vice versa. And later on, when they are reenacting how they possibly seduced each other in the alley. And they are taking they are taking restarts in the seduction LARP. Mrs. Su is commenting like, my husband would never say that, or he would never do it like that. And she is asking for them to start again, find a new angle how the seduction would have happened. And in these moments, what they are actually doing, they are still trying to be with with their own spouses, but they are trying to do it through like each other by proxy. They're trying to force. For example, Mr. Chow is trying to force upon Mrs. Chow his wife's behavior, so that Mrs. Chow would act like his wife, or how he imagines his wife would have acted when she was seducing Mrs. Chow's husband. And that is a lonely act of trying to have another person pretending to be the one person that you kind of would still want to be with.
Well, if so, them being kind of a proxies to each other, maybe that could explain why the love didn't really last, at least for the lady. And maybe the guy is trying to convince himself that this is working and this is real, but maybe it never really fully was realized. And in that sense, the societal obstacle is understandable.
Well, I do think that the love between the two, Mr. Chow and Mrs. Su, it becomes real in the course of the film. They just desperately wanna pretend that it won't or it doesn't. And by the time when they finally realize what has happened, that they have fallen for each other, and therefore they are exactly like, their spouses, the original cheating couple. By that time, well, they are too weak to really fight against the society around them. They are too scared to do it. They more just confirm into what society expects from them. And at the very final moments, when they once again they try to connect, like Mr. Chow tries to find Mrs. Su again and almost does this, almost nearly comes to her door. But at that point, it's just a cool twist of fate. The new landlord just tells him that in that apartment there lives a single mom with her kid, and like as it turns out, that single mom with a kid that is now single Mrs. Su. So the opportunity was there, but it was just case of bad luck. It was just that one door that Mr. Chow just decided that must not be Mrs. Su. I will not check out who lives in that apartment. I will not knock on that door. And it's just like the extremely shitty luck and a bad twist of fate that happens to play between them. And as a result, the final chance for them to be ending up being together closes and the end credits roll.
Yeah, they kept saying that, at least the guy kept saying that, well, now we are as bad as our spouses, but I never could really agree with that. Maybe it's because of my blind spot as the audience that I don't want to see it that way. But yeah, in a way, I guess that's true. And on the other hand, it all started because they were betraying them, so what do you expect is gonna happen? But yeah, sure, they weren't out in the open, and if I could borrow something that you said in the first episode that we did, once again, the term kyttäjämummo, the kyttäjämummo aspect of the in the mood for love is very strong here. Like, it's 1960s and all, but holy hell, this community of people living in the same building, it is so tight-knit, and it has such a one kind of kyttäjämummo aspect that somebody's always looking what you're doing and trying to find out what's going on in your life. That kind of a small town community feeling that is extremely strong there. Something that is extremely strong as well is the complete inability to deliver anything to the right door in that building. I don't know how. Don't they have any names on their doors? Even the moving companies, like, where the fuck is this going?
Yeah. But yeah, you're right. It's that like the kyttäjämummo aspect of the community within the house or the hotel whatever it is where they are living in. It's kind of like it is extreme.
Luxurious condo.
That truly that is like extreme. I like. As a person who obviously haven't lived in 1960s Hong Kong, I don't know exactly how accurate that is, but seeing how often Wong Kar-wai returns back into 1960s, the time period obviously is special for him, and I would gather that he would know how the society in Hong Kong was during 1960s. So perhaps, 1960s Hong Kong really was full of kyttäjämummos who formed communities that acted almost like prisons, to a point where simply the act that Mrs. Su chooses to go out and buy her noodles from some noodle stand repeatedly actually becomes a problem for them. And they make a comment how Mrs. Su dresses too fancily to go outside simply to buy noodles, and how Mrs. Su should take evenings so that she eats with them and should join the mahjong game, even though she obviously is not interested in mahjong, or mahjong. So, but that's constantly like they're constantly being valued by how they connect with the rest of the community in the condos. and how much they are willing to take part, how much they are willing to take part in their gender-based expected roles. Like, nobody comments that Mr. Chow never dines with them, or does not sit in the mahjong table with the rest of the group. But when Mrs. Su does not do this, then all of a sudden it's a problem.
Good point. Regarding 2046, I have some questions. Like, Wong Kar-wai, I understand that you chose this hotel room in The Mood for Love to be 2046, but then to use it as the title of the follow-up, and to make the clear point that 2046 is actually a place where these guys want to go and can never leave. What do you make of that? I'm sure that nobody in Hong Kong wants to go to 2046. It could be, though, true that they can never come back, given that it's gonna be 2047 then, and it's gonna be the year of their end as like a two-system Hong Kong. You don't have to make anything of that, but I'm just curious why a Hong Konger wants to make that point.
Well, precisely because of that. Like, 2046, under the surface, is extremely political movie. The whole 2046 being the repeated thing in everything, in the hotel room and in the story and the name of the film, it's not an accident.
Mm-hmm.
And the reasons, precisely like you point out, behind why 2046 is such a big deal here, it is because that's like that's the fated year when Hong Kong is supposed to be like transferred back to China, and kind of the point that why this is my reading, and I'm kind of quite trustful in my take, is that it's like the point of 2046 is to look back upon something that you lost and wishing that you would be able to find it again, to achieve it again. And my understanding of Hong Kong as a nation is that it's not like looking too hopefully, or it's not too anxious, anxiously waiting for the 50-year time, like the 50-year deal, after which it will be handed back to China, like, prominently. And well, I don't know what to say. This two-country solution will end. Two-country rule would end in Hong Kong. So my take is that in 2046 they are already, Wong Kar-wai is making the point that Hong Kong wouldn't want to find itself being completely handed over to China. So now in the movie 2046, where everybody is looking back at a time period that they have lost and hoping that they could return back into that moment, Wong Kar-wai is also, as a director, is stating that Hong Kong will be looking back at the time when it wasn't fully under Chinese reign, and like when the handover will happen in 2046. After that, Hong Kong and Hong Kongers will be kind of reminiscing fondly and hoping that they could return back into what they had previously, with this two-country deal, two-country sovereign rule.
Yeah, that's very good reading as well. Why is it so hard to love? God damn, people are complicated in these films. At least that's my feeling overall, coming from this and watching them pretty much 3 on the row. People are really complicated. Relationships are overtly complicated.
And that's why you shouldn't have them. Like, life is much more rational and clear if you are just like me. You bunker down in your mom's basement and never talk to anyone ever.
Yeah, here I just am recording my first episode from the Philippines, and I moved here Because of love, so wish me luck.
Love is stupid and not nearly as stupid as women. But not
Oh,
just the love. What also is quite complicated here is kind of the production history behind these films. Like, and I do believe that this is also something that showcases in the creative or the artistic and narrative decisions that Wong Kar-wai does. Like originally, he rose to prominence in 1988 when he was found as a possible new director of the Hongkongese gangster films, which was a genre that was in high rise in Hong Kong back in the days, very much following thanks to John Woo's Better Tomorrow, which became a major hit both in Hong Kong and also on foreign markets. So all of a sudden, gangster film boom in Hong Kong. And Wong Kar-wai was picked up as one of the directors who were given a chance to make a gangster film, and that's what his first movie as Tears Go By was. And well, as Tears Go By, that was also a kind of a big deal in Hong Kong back in the day. People really loved that movie. And that gave him the freedom to do what he wanted next, which is Days of Being Wild, which is not a gangster movie. It's very much a romance film drama, but it does have at the very end of it. And I do think that this is an act of transformation on Wong Kar-wai's part. There is the passport deal, and there is Yadi being shot to death, which I took it that's when Wong Kar-wai is for the last time he's gazing back at the gangster movies that gave him prominence and moving forward from them. And the audience reaction to Days of Being Wild was extremely hostile, to a point where the disappointed audience members who thought that they were getting another gangster movie, they got so pissed off that they even they destroyed the seats in the movie theaters, cut them open and ripped out the stuffings.
so they became the gangsters. They became the gangsters in the audience.
Yeah, but precisely, like all the knife violence that was restricted from from them by the movie itself, then they decided to perpetrate it personally. And but what saved Wong Kar-wai there was that even though the audience reaction was extremely hostile, the critical reaction to Days was really positive. Once again, it was a movie that was picked up outside of Hong Kong, and it also inside of Hong Kong. It was somewhat of a critical darling, and it's that critical reaction, the critical credibility that Wong Kar-wai achieved that eventually gave him the possibility and the freedom to go his own direction. From that point onwards, Wong Kar-wai is not so much anymore working with production houses and producers. He's more and more paying the movies out of his own pocket, which means that like he's taking more of a financial risk, but as a trade-off, he now is getting more and more artistic freedom to a point where in movies like 2046 he has almost complete control of the production and he can create the films like he wants to. Something that may have also fed into this was, like you already mentioned, the extremely infamous production process of Days. Mm-hmm. Which, like you mentioned, was a film that was being written as it was being shot. And the whole production took like 15 months because of this. And it was a huge headache basically to everybody. The DP, the actors who felt that the project was like too stressful, and most likely also the producers.
And Wong Kar-wai didn't get his chance to make the sequel then right away because of those issues, but later on he was able to realize in the mood fall off in 2046.
Yeah, and a lot to do that with that was the follow up films that he did, like Chungking Express, which was such of a well received movie that Quentin Tarantino himself looks like did an opener for that film once. So once again, well loved abroad, also in Hong Kong. Then there was the Ashes of Time, which was a wuxia kung fu film is seen as a proto version for the more artistic martial arts movies and more philosophical martial arts movies, like for example Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which is a Ang Lee's masterpiece, and many have said that that film would have never had happened hadn't Wong Kar-wai kind of paved the way with Ashes of Time. And that was followed by Fallen Angels, once again extremely loved movie, and Happy Together, which was a prominent like gay film starter in Hong Kong. And from Happy Together, we finally get to in the Mood for Love, which is Wong Kar-wai finally making a sequel to Days. Like 10 years later, he makes a sequel to a movie that pretty much like which hammered down the possibility that he can jumpstart his career. Had Wong Kar-wai made more gangster movies, a la As the Years Go By, which was a gangster movie mixed with Wong Kar-wai staple drama, most likely, I would say Wong Kar-wai would today he would not have the mainstream success that he enjoys. So I would say that Days of Being Wild is the film that truly made Wong Kar-wai's career. And now in the Mood for Love, he's kind of looking back and not paying a tribute, but kind of returning, like his characters who keep returning back into something that they once had and want to kind of relive that moment. Wong Kar-wai himself returns back into the world of Days of Being Wild, and actually succeeds in achieving that moment in time the second time. And then there is 2046, which is a not direct but still a sequel to In the Mood for Love, and a movie that much like its character Mr. Chow, now Wong Kar-wai can also once again kind of have a somber reminiscence of In the Mood for Love and Days of Being Wild. So I do kind of think that Wong Kar-wai as a director has the same drive as his characters in their respected movies. The difference is that where nothing works for his characters, Wong Kar-wai actually succeeds in this looking back and reliving a moment from his past.
It's really mind-boggling when you think about all the episodes that we have done and how many different connections you have had with different directors and who everybody is being influenced by. Like you mentioned Quentin Tarantino, who is webbed to Wong Kar-wai, and Wong Kar-wai is webbed to Hou Hsiao-hsien, and Hou Hsiao-hsien is linked to My Neighbor Totoro, and it just goes on, and it's kind of beautiful to see. And yeah, everybody's inspired by something, and yeah, that could even make its own episode at some point. One final mention, like style-wise, that I wanted to make about 2046 versus In the Mood for Love and even Days of Being Wild is that 2046 is like, from the get-go, it's so much raunchier, much saucier, and there's like even almost, well, I wouldn't say violent level sex, but there's actually sex scenes, and there is just more direct confrontation. Yep. It's just, everything is much stronger and raw and direct, which was interesting because In the Mood for Love was more, I don't know, they were more polite with each other. I got that impression. I don't speak Chinese, but anyway. And yeah, it just felt like more traditionally built, or kind of reflecting the way that you might interact with people during those times, especially when you don't still know them very well. Whereas, yeah, it complete change of gears in 2046.
Yeah, and I took notice of the same thing, because quite a lot of sex does happen in 2046 to a point where it's a couple of times it's even a plot point, the sex that ends up happening. And usually Wong Kar-wai doesn't really do sex scenes. I was kind of curious also that like why in 2046? Why is that movie, like you said it, why is it more raunchier? And I don't know if that's a like once again a transitioning thing from Wong Kar-wai. I don't remember if there was sex scenes in Happy Together, and if there was, I don't remember what type of like how raunchy sex scenes you had. But 2040 Happy Together was a movie that Wong Kar-wai couldn't make in Hong Kong. He made it in Argentina. And once again, and then after 2046, his second movie, once again, is a film that is not made in Hong Kong. It's My Blueberry Nights, which was his first film, and to this date, also their last and only film done in America. So, once again, I can't be completely out of my ass here, but I'm not certain if the raunchy nature of 2046 is some type of a subconscious transitioning from Wong Kar-wai as he kinda prepares himself for his American debut. Because sex scenes are something that are not strangers for American cinema, unlike for Wong Kar-wai's Hong Kongian era. But so, yeah, dear audiences, that was like 3 films from Wong Kar-wai. It was 3 movies, it was a lot of heartbreak, it was a civilized difference in opinion between me and Karri. So with that out of the way, how do you feel, man? Are you ready for the quickies?
Shoot.
Okay, well, I will most definitely. Just questions, not bullets. This is not America after all. Special mention for actor goes to... That's a really good answer.
John Chewy. I kind of liked her performance. It was all over the spectrum. Sometimes even actually crying that I couldn't kind of fathom why to cry at these particular moments. But I think she did a lot of carrying of some scenes in a way that you really connected and liked the character, and there was kind of a spirit to the lady which was something unexpected and different to the other movies, so I kind of like that direct confrontation and language.
Yeah, I on my end, I'm gonna be more predictable and more lame, but I'm gonna go with Tony Leung, who plays Mr. Chow.
Yeah.
In well, basically all 3 films.
Yeah. He famously is this kind of an actor who is able to do a lot with just his facial expressions, which might be quite a lot actually in the Hong Kongese Chinese circles, because, well, I would say that, well, it kind of comes with the culture as well, that you might not be able to read so much from the faces, but in his case, yeah, and a very likable person to watch, always on screen.
That he is. But is there other actors or things, cows, wallpapers, drapes, clocks that you would like to bring a special mention to?
I think the Noodles had a great performance.
I'm gonna mine to clocks. There's a repeated clocks. Sometimes they are on time. Sometimes they skip time. Sometimes they are stuck on time. Most of the time they don't know what the damn they are doing. But now that we have discussed about a lot about how we felt about these 3 films, is there something that really resonated with you, or vice versa, something that most definitely did not resonate with you?
Okay, so going back to the mention that it was kind of hard to put stuff together in the notes regarding these films. I don't know, just these films have such of a meandering quality that it's yeah, it's because of the lack of the typical structure to the films that it's kind of hard to put your finger on particular place, I guess. What did I like the most? I guess the style, just the general visual storytelling, how much he was able to tell with just the actors' faces after torturing them to death with repeated takes, I guess. And what I didn't really like about the films was, I guess, the kind of I think some of the shots just take way too long. And I just noticed something that I enjoy Wong Kar-wai's Love Trilogy way more when it's played on double speed. So there's that.
Yeah, I on the other hand, I quite did like the non-linear structure. It's once again, I understand that it's not everybody's cup of tea, and it's a thing that is very much a hit and miss film by film basis. Like sometimes it really works, and sometimes you absolutely just hate it. But for whatever the reason, I do like when Wong Kar-wai does the non-linear. Can't quite like precisely accurately pinpoint out why. For me, Wong Kar-wai works better than some other directors who try to do the same stunt.
Yeah.
But there is something in Kar-wai's approach. Perhaps it's the fact that for me, 2046 original was the first Wong Kar-wai film. That film's narrative is like but basically the disorganization of the structure is perhaps the strongest in all of his filmography. So to me, I kind of connect that with Kar-wai. And 2046 for me, what saved the structure for me was the kind of the bookend story, the fictional story of 2046 that Mr. Chow is writing. So perhaps that's like the magic ingredient.
Yeah, I kept wondering about this. What is it that it just maybe doesn't click with me with at least this Love Trilogy of Wong Kar-wai? I mean, I have liked the dude's other works like Chungking Express, but on the other hand, there's just something like throughout the podcast there has been a lot of very artistic films that don't have the typical storytelling structure. And I have quite been fond of many of those, but in the case of these three, maybe I'm just not emotionally connecting with the films, like I said. So I think I'm missing something. Some kind of a heart is not connecting with me with these films, even though I think I just intellectually understand perfectly what he's doing, what he's trying to do, what he wants to say. But I'm just not connecting fully with that. And I don't know why.
Yeah, and sometimes sometimes that just does happen, and there is never there is no clear explanation, like why you just kind of don't feel the movie in a certain way. But that's kind of the tricky thing with art always. At the end of the day, it always comes down to the individual who experiences the art piece.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, it's Michael Bay's Transformers films,
Oof.
which are like hands down 100% masterpieces, and absolutely everybody loves them.
Well, I can say I definitely had some fond memories watching that in the theater. It made an impression on me.
But in one adjective, how would you describe today's trio of films?
Sleepy.
In my end, I choose more like kinder adjective. From my end, it's reminiscent. And is there some special order that you would like to put the films in, or are they just like equally good, equally bad?
Who made this childish question?
It was you.
Oh.
But much like with Mr. Chow in Wong Kar-wai's films, this is the moment when your old mistakes come back to face you. Perhaps you can someday write a best-selling novel about the stupidity of this question.
Well, regarding writing novels, I guess I most enjoyed 2046. It was kind of a nice amalgamation of everything that we kind of had in the previous films, and more of this kind of a direct, maybe even faster storytelling, maybe even more visual fiesta than in the two previous ones, and kind of interesting mishmash with the whole storytelling and the CGI and the Japanese boyfriend put into the entire story, and androids having sex with Japanese guys and what have you. Yeah, that was the most fun I had, and let's put as the second maybe in the Mood for Love, and the third would be Days of Being Wild, which maybe it was kind of a proto movie, and then the next one's kind of improved on it.
Yeah, that's my order as well. Pretty much for the exact same reasons. For me, like I already mentioned, 2046 is for me is the first Wong Kar-wai film I saw, and everybody kind of makes a point about that being a sequel for In the Mood for Love and Days of Being Wild, but I still think that 2046 is kind of loose sequel. Like, even if you haven't seen the previous movies, you don't really have a trouble understanding and following 2046. At least not more than you would have like otherwise also.
Yeah, that's true, but if you have seen the previous installments, then you will get more out of 2046, and you will have notice these callback moments, and go like, aha, good one, cycle is repeating, that too.
Yeah, agreed. So, Karri, complete the sentence. You really know you are watching Wong Kar-wai's Love Trilogy when?
When you first experience the days of being an asshole, then you're in the mood for cheating, and then you discover 2046, a new modern android sex position.
You really know you're watching Wong Kar-wai's Love Trilogy when you are being just a complete jerk in every relationship, but gosh darn, women just can't fall head over heels all over you, because women always constantly just love the jerks, and especially because Hong Kong and 1960s.
Amen.
But to get to the real meat and potatoes of tonight,
We eat rice here.
which today is rice and noodles. Would you recommend today's trilogy to our listeners?
I I wouldn't. Who am I to say that you shouldn't watch this? I mean, but because my experience is what it is, I had this kind of a more lukewarm side of feeling throughout these movies. Just there was something like the kind of, I understand what they're doing once again, but I just don't feel it, I guess, strongly enough. I didn't get these amazing experiences that many of these, so they call them professional critics, say that they experienced when they were watching these films. That never before has the whole color cascade of emotions been projected on screen as well as in The Mood for Love. And yeah, okay, I don't feel the same way. So Days of Being Wild was on the bottom of my list, which I wouldn't really go out of my way to recommend, because there's so many other movies also that I could recommend. In the Mood for Love, also no, but I would perhaps even be kind to recommend 2046. But actually, I don't, because if you haven't seen In the Mood for Love at least, then you won't enjoy it as much. So it's a no from me.
Okay, fair enough. You mentioned the professional critic sentimentality that there's that they have felt this experience that never before has the feelings been put into such of a cascade of colors before in cinema, and I actually had that same bloody experience when I saw 2046 for the first time as a matinee screening. So I kind of like is there hype behind the professional critics and their approach on Wong Kar-wai? Most definitely, yeah. He's somewhat of a Hong Kong director darling, critical darling, and that most definitely, I am like certain that that does play a role in how critics approach his films. Then again, that status as a critical darling did not save my Blueberry Nights at all. Boy, did that get a vicious treatment from the critics, ending up in the valley of okay movies. And I have to agree once again with critics. My Blueberry Nights most definitely not the strongest outing from Wong Kar-wai, but I like very strongly. For a mile, I actually do side with critics over Wong Kar-wai's films, and I do side with critics when it comes to the Love trilogy of his. From my end, just like it was with Chungking Express, I do recommend Wong Kar-wai. I do recommend this trilogy. I do recommend this trilogy more than I perhaps would recommend Chungking Express. I do think that as individual films, these are, well, air quotation marks better. And I do think that In the Mood for Love, and especially 2046, which, like with you, also is my favorite of the trilogy. I do think that 2046 perhaps is the best film I've seen from Kar-wai. And I absolutely do love that movie. Hands down, like, biggest recommendation from me to 2046. And I do recommend also In the Mood for Love and Days of Being Wild.
Yeah, okay, well, yeah, it's just funny. We both like 2046 most of the bunch, it seems, and many critics weren't in agreement. That many said that 2046 is kind of more lackluster than In the Mood for Love for whatever reason. But hey, you get only the right opinions here, so consider yourself corrected.
Yeah, I can partly understand, or I think that I believe I can partly understand where that mentality comes with critics, because 2046 is the one that most uses things like CGI and even more dramatic music. At times, perhaps even more dramatic cutting than In the Mood for Love. So In the Mood for Love, it's more tight. It's can we say, a smaller in its presentation, and therefore perhaps an easier for like seen it all critics to accept than 2046, which is a sequel, and it's bigger and has CGI and has the sci-fi thing and has more score, etc., etc., etc. So part of that sentimentality between the movies can stem from simply the fact that In the Mood for Love is still more held back as a film.
All right.
But that being out of the way, dear listeners, would you perhaps recommend Wong Kar-wai's Love trilogy to your friends and loved ones? And if you happen to be from Hong Kong, would you recommend us to fact check exactly how the reign in Hong Kong is currently being divided between nations and what happens in 2046? And would you recommend Chinese rule above everything else? Most likely not. Checking out the news coverage, and good for you for that.
Yeah.
Fuck the communist rule, etc. But yeah, whatever floats your boat and grabs your heart this week, please let us know all about it in the comment section.
Or just don't if you have communistic tendencies in your opinions. I've already seen that from some unfortunate brainwashed Chinese people, so if you're one of those, please don't contact us.
If you have brainwashed Chinese communistic tendencies, in that case, please don't. If you just have communistic tendencies, but from my end, Be free, by all means. Fuck capitalism, etc., etc., etc. Just as much as it annoys you, Karri.
Vasemmistoliitto. Yeah. Go.
Markkinatalous alas.
So, Henrik, what is our next departure?
I would hazard a guess it's Russian pop music. This not being a film podcast.
Yeah, something is topical. Russia. Should we look at Russian films?
Perhaps, not. In current situation, we just avoid Russian films. Not simply as an act of a protest, but also to in a desperate attempt to try to protect the sovereignty of Finland. Neighbors being what they are currently.
Maybe this would help if the Flick Lab would look at what was the Vladimir Putin's favorite Russian film. We could take a look at that. How he got inspired.
We can try to do a Vladimir Putin top 5 filmography special episode, and then send him the link. Finland is not a NATO membership country yet.
Any other good ideas? Sergei Lavrov's top 5. I have a documentary about bears with Spanish commentary.
I can make you a documentary of me clopping down few bottles of Karhu.
Well, it's been super artistic. Recently, I'm still recovering from Laszlo Krasnahorkai. So, what about that RoboCop?
Yeah, fine. Let's do RoboCop.
Well,
so in next episode, it's going to be RoboCop in some form.
Oh.
We don't yet know how and why.
I have no idea.
But RoboCop something.
Children of the Corn.
Let's all look up for that one.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Goddamn fucking remake. Let's see how RoboCop turns out. But next week, something RoboCop.
Something.
Maybe RoboCop and his friends. Might be RoboCop the animated series. Most likely not, because that was pretty atrocious at times. But yeah, until next week.
Sarah Connor's Chronicles next week. Okay, RoboCop. See you.
Until then.
Tästä saisiko intron vielä? Ei se halua, selvä.
But the hallway still always. 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 But always. Ja katkaisen nauhoituksen.